Greetings, this is Ty Brown with AthleticDirectorU. I'm here at the Collegiate Sports Summit and I'm joined by Sandy Barbour. Sandy is the Director of Athletics at Penn State University. Greetings, Sandy. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for doing this, Ty.
Now, Sandy, you've been in the profession, in the AD chair since roughly 1996. You made a stop as a deputy during that time, but spent time in the chair at Tulane, time at Cal. Now you're at Penn State. Started off coaching in the profession. So you have a wealth of experience in terms of leadership, in terms of influence, in terms of what it takes to be successful from a leadership position. In my time here with AthleticDirectorU, I've heard you talk about a number of things. One of the things was making sure that you understand why you're doing what you do, right? The why, right? We heard Simon Sinek and we heard a lot of people talk about having a purpose. I've heard you talk about making sure that the organization and that leaders understand that it's about the people within the organization, the people you're leading, and the relationships you build with those people. I wonder what the next step in the evolution of that leadership philosophy is while I have you here for a few minutes to talk to us.
Yeah, how do you take those concepts and put them into play for the living, breathing organization, right? And the really important piece of that is that we don't lead widgets.
Right.
We lead people. And I think we all get so busy that we lose track of that. We forget about that. And I think that I've become such a devotee of Simon Sinek's because all of his concepts help us focus back on that. It's the why, and there's an organizational why. It's part of every leader's vision statement, and that journey the journey that we paint, that picture that we paint for our organization, for all aspects of the organization, those that work for you, those that work with you, those that help you make it work. Yeah. But then there's also, because we lead people and it's in our charge to inspire them and motivate them, something that I've found really helpful is to help them work through their why. Okay. What's their individual purpose? Now that has to fit into the organizational why and purpose, but why is it that they do what they do? You don't want people just coming to work to be putting in the time. And in college athletics, that just, it can't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
What we do is too all-consuming, and we use the term burnout. And if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, you're not going to do it very long. Right. And I think that passion is fueled by an understanding and a focus on why.
Well, I've always wondered, and it's a bigger conversation probably for another day, but you hear leaders in athletics talk about core values all the time, but I never necessarily hear them say our purpose as a department, our purpose, and I'm sure there's a in general purpose, right, to enhance the academic mission of the university. That's probably the purpose of all athletics departments, but I don't hear leaders talk about that in athletics much. You hear more about core values. I wonder about that. And I wonder about understanding the why of a department when you come in, and does that change when the leadership changes? Because it seems like a purpose should be a constant thing.
It should be. Right. And again, that isn't any different than a new leader comes in, puts together a new strategic plan that has a mission, vision, and values. You may use different words. Mm-hmm. There may be different tactics because of the time and of how the industry that you're in has evolved. But the institution, in our case, schools and colleges and universities, they don't change. And you're the successful candidate to become the leader because you fit their overall why. So it's all gotta fold under. It's all gotta fit. But you may say it differently. Right. That may reach an audience better than maybe, or more effectively, than the way it was previously articulated. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, every institution where I've had the opportunity to lead, whether it be as an athletic director or a deputy AD, I was the successful candidate because I fit their values. Obviously, there came a time at Penn State, a place that not a lot of change over time, where we had a new athletic director, where we had a new head football coach, and there was a lot of, okay, this person's different from what we're used to. But ultimately, I think there's been an acceptance and a comfort level within our community because they ultimately understood once they got to know us that we operated under the same value structure that they always had. Right. Maybe different tactics, maybe different initiatives, but still the same values. And I think then there was a comfort with, okay, we're going to be all right.
Right. This is a different way of executing the purpose that we have. The thing about purpose, I'll give you a quick story here, and I want to relate it to people, right? I went off to school to Michigan State. My mother wanted to get me out of the streets of Los Angeles. A bunch of our family was back in Michigan State. She sent me there. In freshman year, I tried out for the football team. I didn't make it. So I called home to my mother and said, hey, I'm going to transfer to Arizona State because that's the only other school that accepted me. And because they won't accept me on the football team. And she said, well, you need to talk to your father about that. So I got on the phone with my father, and he was like, so what is this about transferring? I said, well, they don't want me on the football team this spring, so I'm going to come home this summer, and I'll transfer to Arizona State in the fall, and I'll try out there. He said, well, here's the thing. We didn't send you there to play football. We sent you there to bring home a piece of paper, which was the degree, right? He said, so you'll register for your class, and you'll be back in the fall. End of discussion. But what that did for me was clarify I had a purpose for being at Michigan State. Getting on the football team was a goal, right? You can't confuse the goals and the purpose of what you're doing. And so that helped me as a person to understand why I was at Michigan State, what I was there to do.
And the piece of paper is a physical manifestation of the education.
Exactly.
And part of your education may have been playing on the football team. Right. But it wasn't the whole thing.
It wasn't the whole thing.
And it wasn't the ultimate purpose or your ultimate why, which is to be prepared for the rest of life.
Right, exactly.
Through that education.
How do you, in terms of your leadership, help people to understand their purpose in working in athletics or just being who they are?
Yeah, it's because it starts with challenging them. Right. Exactly. And absolutely being very deliberate about what is your why, what is your purpose, and that's work that we all have to go through as individuals. What is it that motivates us? What is it that makes us passionate? There were a lot of things that my dad did for me, or showed me, or inspired me growing up. But the biggest one was he loved what he did. He was very, very passionate about serving the United States of America as a naval officer, as a Navy pilot. And that I grew up with that. And even without saying it to me, I knew I had to go find something to do that I was as passionate about as he was. Mm-hmm. And so it's helping our people find that. They have to do the work, but it starts with being very deliberate about what's your why, what's your purpose, why do you do this, what are you passionate about, what excites you about what you do. So it's being intentional about talking about it, challenging them to find it, and then giving them the space and the time to do that within your structure. And I think a huge part of that is being tolerant of failure. Right. You've got to give them the opportunity to fail because that gives them the opportunity to succeed. And so I think that's the big piece. Now, they have to understand that in order for it to be a success within this organization is that their why has to fit within what we already talked about, has to fit within the organizational why. It has to be in concert with. But it's also part of that process of they understand you care, because part of understanding the reason for pursuing and understanding your why is because that's where the fulfillment is going to come from. You want them to be happy. You want them to be successful. And I talk all the time to our folks, because we've got a lot of competitive people in our business, very ambitious, want to go up through the ranks, and they need to understand that that's all going to happen for them when and if and when the organization is successful. So keep your focus on contributing to the organizational success, and individually you'll all get what you want and hope and need for.
Right, exactly. I'd like to zoom in just a little bit on in terms of organizational and purpose. For a long time, I worked at the American Football Coaches Association, and there wasn't necessarily a purpose for what I did in my department. I was the director of education, and so I came up with one which helped me focus a little bit with the help of Dutch Balkman.
Yep.
He was at the office one day, and I talked to him about what I was thinking, and he helped me develop it, and it was to facilitate the discussion of all things related to the football coaching profession, the game of football, and those who play the game. And that helped me, because Dutch was like, okay, now that you have that statement, everything you do, you run it by that. And if that helps to execute that purpose,
that's your filter.
That's the filter, right?
That's the filter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was emphatic about it being simply stated, meaning don't convolute it with a whole bunch of language, because then it becomes hard for you to focus on what the actual purpose is. So I wonder, in your departments or just the organization as a whole, how do you define, like, how have you done it in terms of where you've been, and then in terms of the graduate assistant that's there, or in terms of your deputy, or those kind of things?
Well, you hit on it. It's got to be simple.
Right.
Everyone's got to be able to understand it. I mean, the worst thing we can have is a vision statement that's 12 sentences long, and, I think it's this. At Penn State, preparing students for a lifetime of impact.
Right. That's why you're here.
It's I know it. It's committed to memory. I love it when our coaches, whether you're with them when they're talking to recruits, or they're on the podium from a media standpoint, they'll say something like, they'll use maybe different words, right. But you turn to your colleague and they go, oh, they've been listening. Yeah. They've got it. They've internalized it, and that's when you know that it resonates, that it means something. And whether it's the graduate assistant, or the head coach, or the academic counselor, or the compliance person, or the marketing whoever it is, they understand what their role is related to that purpose. Sometimes you've got the circle, and your why is at the center of the golden
right.
circle,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And the further you move away from that, now I'm not talking about the why, what, how, but I'm talking about, okay, at the center of the circle are students. So you've got your obviously your coaches, you've got your academic counselors, you've got sports medicine and strength and conditioning that work every day with students. And then you get a little further and further and further away from that, whether it's your fundraisers, or it's your corporate sponsorship people, or it's your ticket sales, and they don't have as much day-to-day contact with students. It's not hard for those that are in that bullseye circle with the students to really resonate and connect to preparing students for a lifetime of impact. The person in the ticket office, maybe the accountant that's reconciling the monthly or the weekly revenue from ticket sales is further out on this circle. So you got to work with them to, how do you impact this? Mm-hmm. So that they understand, if my absolute why is students, their experience, their preparation, how do I connect to that? If they understand that connection, if that connection is real for them, they're going to have a passion about it.
I'll have one more question here, dialing into the people, right? Helping people understand their why. Have you, in your leadership, right? You've been in leadership for a while. Have you seen where someone may not have understood what their why is initially, and over time you can see a change in the person to where, you know what, I think they figured out why they're here or why they exist, period. I mean, have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And those are very fulfilling for you as a leader, because you helped that person discover something that's going to change their
well
life.
Beyond the organization.
Well beyond the organization. I mean, it's probably going to do great things for the organization too.
Right.
But whether they stay with your organization or they go someplace else, that's going to follow them. Their ability to have focused in on, articulated, and really drilled down on their purpose. Once you have that, you never lose that. So that goes back to it starts with being very intentional, very purposeful about, Ty, what's your why? Have you spent some time doing the work and really thinking about it? And for a lot of people, nobody's ever asked them that. Right. And they may not have thought about it. They may have thought about it or done some thinking or work kind of peripheral to it, but not that
digging right in to understand.
Digging right into it kind of question.
Right.
And I do think it's life-changing.
I think it is too. I've done that too. And I think that's one of the most important things. Just the first step you take. Why am I here? Why are we here? What is the purpose of the organization? Why do I do what I do? It helps you define the role where somebody doesn't think they're that important. Well, if you're not here, that job isn't getting done. And this is why your role is important to help us execute the purpose as an organization.
Yeah. And having said all of this, we all need to do a better job of that. Some of us lead really large organizations and, can't get to everybody or think we can't get to everybody. But you know what? If you never try, you never will.
Right.
It might take you a year. It might take you 2 years. But if you don't start, you definitely don't get there.
I agree. Well, Sandy, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on Athletic Director U.
Always a pleasure, Ty. Thank you.
That was Sandy Barbour. She's the Vice President for Athletics at Penn State University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with Athletic Director U. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.